As Pride Month kicks off, there is a growing movement of activists working to call out queer organizations for pinkwashing and asking them not to take money from companies with financial ties to Israel's current military operation in Gaza. In recent weeks, activist groups around the world have been calling on Pride organizations to show solidarity with Palestine and divest from sponsors and affiliations with companies that, in the words of one group, quote, enable the occupation and ethnic cleansing of Palestine. A collective of queer organizers in the US, led by the Muslim Alliance for Sexual and Gender Diversity and the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights, is calling on Pride parades and national queer organizations to immediately ban corporations that support Israel's military efforts from sponsoring or participating in Pride events. And meanwhile, across the pond, a collective of British queer groups, including Lesbians and Gays Support the Minors, Lesbians and Gays Support the Migrants, Queers for Palestine, London Trans Pride, and ACT UP London, have called on London Pride to cut ties with Israel-affiliated sponsors. But some large Pride organizations have actually already taken steps in this direction. Copenhagen Pride released a statement back in February expressing solidarity with Palestine and concern over its sponsors' ties to Israeli companies, especially those operating in the West Bank. Organizers said all sponsors of the annual parade, which takes place in August this year, would be subject to questions, quote, about their interests and activities in Israel and Palestine. And as a result, several sponsors, including pharmaceutical giant Novo Nordisk, shipping and logistics company Maersk, and private sector association Donks Industry, have pulled their support from the event, resulting in a reduced annual budget for Copenhagen Pride this year. And this movement to hold Pride organizations to account for their sponsors is not dissimilar from the recent wave of campus protests across North America that have called on academic institutions to disclose and divest from funding related to the Israeli military. Calls for Pride organizations to reconsider their sponsors or reimagine corporate involvement are not new. Groups like Queers Against Israeli Apartheid have been fixtures at Pride parades and were controversially banned and reinstated by Toronto Pride in the early 2010s. These sorts of movements are also not even unique to Palestine. Back in 2016, Black Lives Matter Toronto staged a sit-in at the Toronto Pride Parade to bring forward demands including more diversity in staffing and the exclusion of police floats from future parades. As many activists told Xtra in November, the issue of Palestinian liberation is deeply intertwined with queer activism.
Our liberation as queer and trans people is bound up in the liberation of Palestinians, and it's not metaphorical. It's our government that has been calling to outlaw protests. It's our universities that are threatened to sanction unions that are support of Palestine.
So it's not surprising to see queer activists call for Pride organizations to reflect some level of solidarity with Palestinians. It's worth keeping an eye out to see what further actions might take place as Pride Month rolls along.